Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One-Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm discussing Race to the Raft, a solo and cooperative polyomino and tile-laying game. And disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of this one. I really enjoyed Isle of Cats, the game this is kind of a sequel to, but how does a solo cooperative version of the polyomino fun work? Let's find out and get to the list. So my number 5 point is a bit of a mix for my taste, and that's the card choice that you complete at the beginning of each round. Each of the players will take 3 cards, choosing as they like from any of these 4 piles, and the piles indicate in a pretty cool way the distribution of terrain types in each deck. So like the square deck is most likely to have green and yellow, but we'll have a bit of purple, red, and blue. And on the positive side, it is an interesting choice choosing which cats you need to deal with and like which colors you need the most of. But then there's also nice variety in the actual cards you draw, which is going to keep the game replayable even when you're doing the same scenario, because the same cards won't come up and the same movement options won't present themselves. But on the negative side, some people might find the randomness frustrating, like if they try to draw a bunch of cards for green, and well, this one worked out well, but it might not have any green on it at all. And also in higher player count games where you're all drawing 3 cards, it can feel a little bit chaotic and muddled, at least in the groups that I've played with, trying to like decide who gets what and organize all of that. And that goes right into my number 4, which is also a mix for my taste, and that's the cooperation and communication in the game. And this is going to be very group dependent. So while you're choosing cards, while you're choosing who gets to play the next card, you can talk as freely as you want. But once it comes time to actually put a pathway out on the board or put out the fire that's slowly consuming the island, you aren't allowed to talk at all. So they're basically trying, I think, to eliminate alpha player, because this is basically at different player counts just taking around the same number of actions and the same number of cards and dividing them among people. So in a way, when you're playing multiplayer, it's still kind of like playing solo, except with discussion, but then limits on the discussion. And those limits are going to be very hit or miss for groups. You have tokens, either these little human talking tokens or these cat meow tokens. And basically, you're allowed to use these when someone is placing a tile or whatever to be like, no, please don't place it there. We're going to die. We need to not block off blue, or I have a perfect card and you're ruining it. Or if you have the cat one, you can just go meow, 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 and meow at them incessantly until they hopefully understand like what you're warning them not to do or encouraging them to do. Some groups are going to find this fun and goofy. Some groups are going to find this incredibly frustrating. But my third point is a full pro for my taste, and that's the variety in scenarios and how you play the game. So they've got these campaigns made up of 4 to 8 scenarios, but don't let that fool you. There's no like story or anything to follow along here. It's just like generally sets of increasingly difficult scenarios that add in new complications and things as you go. For example, just looking at the beginning of campaign 3 compared to campaign 1 or 2, suddenly you have these like way smaller boards and the fire is out of control, like creeping up from one specific spot. It really feels different in a pretty impressive way. And my favorite thing is how they really ramp things up for the advanced campaign, because then you get these white cats that can only move along paths, so the colors don't matter as much to them. You get these disaster cards you draw when you've moved a lot of cats, which have like really interesting varied effects, sometimes even helping you in a fun way. Just really, really cool additions when your group is ready. My number 2 point is also a full pro, and that's the polyomino aspect of the game, which is putting out the fire as the island falls to destruction. So at the end of most turns where you're placing cards and stuff, you're going to draw a random fire polyomino from a bag, and they come in, as you expect, very different shapes and sizes. And then you have to put it down, not just on the board, but adjacent to fire without covering it. And man, this is great. It's just tons of tension, interesting choices, just the pressure, the challenge, the variety in how these tokens come out and the shapes that they come out in is great. And man, when you get a fire shape that like perfectly fits into other stuff you've laid down and like barely hurts you at all because you had just the right spot for it, it is polyomino magic in a moment. I just love it. And that goes directly into my number 1 point about the game, which is also a full pro, and that's the main kind of mechanic of the game, putting out the path cards and trying to create ways for your cats to get the heck out of dodge. And then you also discard path cards to move them. And you're going to get lots of colors. You're not going to get all the right things for the right cats. And especially as you get into advanced mode, you can't just like focus on one cat all the time. You need to be moving them to make space for the fire. And that's like kind of the key genius of the game. It's not just that you have these tiles, but you're managing a bunch of cats at once. You're managing a bunch of of objectives and like little rules that are added in the scenario. You're balancing the need to constantly get ahead of the fire to free up space for it to fit into without negatively impacting you. This might be one of my favorite experiences with polyomino gameplay ever. I know it's a lot to say, but I just really love the combination of the paths and the fire. And certainly it's my favorite polyomino usage in solo co-op. Definitely above something, other games that I really like, such as, I don't know, Kingdom Rush or that kind of thing. So overall, you might enjoy Race to the Raft if you like quick polyomino or tile-laying games with a nice amount of tension and easy ways to ratchet up the difficulty and complexity. But you might want to avoid it if you don't like a bit of randomness in the game, if you want your cooperative gameplay to involve different like roles or classes or jobs for the different players, or if you don't like limited communication mechanics in cooperative games in general, although it would be pretty easy to ignore here. And if you want to see the game in action, I had a double playthrough with a simple and advanced scenario you can check out on the channel. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.